Hello, so this is going to be a video all about films I'd recommend on nuclear war. So this is going to be quite a basic video in many ways. It's just going to be lots of films that are really good depictions of nuclear war. They can be sort of, more serious films or comedy films. And I'm just the ones I'm going to recommend, and I'll give you a brief explanation. Now, because I'm going to have to do a lot of this from memory, I'm probably going to get the names or the years slightly wrong these films came out. So what I'm going to do is, once that I've done the video, in the video description below when you're watching it, I'm going to try and find the IMDb pages for lots of these films, so you can actually click it if you want to find out more about them. Because lots of these films I don't physically have on DVD or whatever. They're ones I've watched online at various points and things like that. Some of them very obscure, hard to find films. So what I'm just going to do is, for those, just try and remember as best I can what they're about. And then underneath there will be, hopefully, an IMDb page if I can find, the thing. So we'll start off with one of the most famous films, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Filmed by Stanley Kubrick, one of the very few comedy films he did. Really, really good film, can't recommend it enough. The Blu-ray looks fantastic at this as well. It's a black and white film, but the contrast, is really good on the Blu-ray. Lots of very good actors in it. Peter Sellers plays several characters in it, including Dr. Strangelove. If you haven't seen this, you'll probably have known lots of references from it because of how famous it is. But basically, what's interesting is there's going to be two films on this list which are both based on the same book Dr. Strangelove was. I'm pretty sure the book was called Red Alert, and the other film based on it was called Failsafe, if I remember right. And what Kubrick did is he did it as a comedy, like a really dark comedy, a black comedy, because Kubrick sort of, when he was doing it as a serious film, realised just how absurd everything seemed, with, everybody wanting to nuke each other, and all the sort of different, mutually assured destruction type things, like stuff with that. So in Dr. Strangelove, it's just a dark comedy. You're laughing at the absurdity of everybody, going to wipe out the Earth. So what the plot's about, or basically, because I've not read the book of Red Alert, but I have seen both film versions, although the plot differs a bit in both films, the plot is basically about where a load of US nuclear bombers, I think it's B-52s in Dr. Strangelove, and is it B-47s in the other one? I can't remember. But regardless, heavy nuclear bombers are all sent over to Russia, to the Soviet Union, to bomb the Soviet Union. And in both of them, it's incorrectly done, it shouldn't have been ordered, and they can't recall the bombers, or there's one bomber they can't recall. And then it's about, that bomber is getting through all the air defence, and it's going to basically start World War III, and end the world if the bomber gets through. So in Failsafe, it's played very straight, and it's, very serious, and it's very tense. In Dr. Strangelove, it's comedic. You're kind of wanting the bomber to get there and bomb in Dr. Strangelove, even though it's the end of the world, and everybody's reaction to it, gets more and more absurd as the film goes on. But if you've not seen Dr. Strangelove, go and watch it. I'm a massive fan of Stanley Kubrick, because he's probably one of the best directors ever. Obviously did things like A Clockwork Orange, The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Eyes Wide Shut, Full Metal Jacket. He did very, very good films. He didn't do many films, but when he did a film, it was, always good. But Dr. Strangelove's probably my favourite of his, because I just love the topic so much, and, I like it because it's, a very funny dark comedy film. So, Failsafe and Dr. Strangelove are worth watching, almost worth watching back to back. I'd say start with Dr. Strangelove, then watch Failsafe. I'd say that the first time I watched Dr. Strangelove, I didn't quite get what all the fuss was about it, but it's one of those films that on repeated watches, you'll probably find funnier and funnier. Also, a little interesting bit of trivia in this, it was originally meant to go out on the day that JFK got assassinated, like one of those weird coincidences. And there was also a line in the film where the B-52 bomber pilot, played by Slim Pickens, says, like, a fella could have a really good weekend in Dallas with all this stuff, and he's got, like, a gun. And then they had to dub it over to say, think it's Vegas, he says afterwards. It's just those strange coincidences. Some people say that's like Illuminati predictive programming, but whatever. So, Dr. Strangelove and Failsafe, two very good films, but obviously Dr. Strangelove I'd say is the better of the two because it's done by Kubrick and it's, just a really dark comedy. Now, the next couple of films, I am not going to remember the years they came out, but again, there hopefully will be IMDb links below. Now, there's one called Special Bulletin and one called Countdown to Looking Glass, and both of these films are they're almost like found footage films before found footage was a thing, but they're like news films where it's like if you had the news on and they were doing a 24/7 coverage of some sort of emergency. It's basically that. I'd say Special Bulletin is the one I preferred out of the two. Special Bulletin's where these terrorists have a nuclear weapon aboard a ship in an American city in the harbour, and they're going to detonate it if their demands aren't met. So it's like all the media hysteria doing the 24/7 coverage of what's going on, then talking to experts and stuff like that. It's a really interesting film. You don't get many films done like it, and sadly I think it's a genre that would be better. Because as I've said on lots of videos, I really don't trust the news media myself because of how, scaremongering it is and things like that. So it's interesting to kind of see a film that's literally about the media wanting to get 24/7 coverage on, like some sort of horrible event to boost their ratings. Countdown to Looking Glass is a similar thing, but it's actually about escalation between the Soviet Union and the United States in, I think it's the, it's like the Persian Sea or something like that. It's, the bit near Iran, and it's about, like a Middle Eastern proxy war that spirals out of control, and then the superpowers come to blows over it, and it's, everything leading up to the nuclear war. Both are very good in the sense that the thing I don't like so much about Countdown to Looking Glass is there's a few scenes in it that aren't actually like news footage ones. It's like where characters are talking to each other, like not with cameras rolling, which I kind of don't like because it sort of breaks your immersion in it a bit. The thing I like about Special Bulletin is all of it is literally done like you were glued to your television, and 24/7 news media was cutting to different people for opinions, cutting back to the live footage, going back to the studio. It's all that sort of stuff, whereas with Countdown to Looking Glass they actually have weird scenes where there's people talking to each other, just randomly in a room that aren't related to the news coverage. Well, it's related, but you know what I mean. That's one of the reasons I don't like it as much. Now, there's also some good documentaries. There's a BBC Panorama one called If the Bomb Drops, and they actually show you Calvert Hatch when it was still classified in that one. They say a location near London they can't show you, and you'll recognise it as being the Rotor entrance to the Calvert Hatch if you've actually been there or seen photos. That's good. It's just a panorama one talking about the effects of nuclear war and everything like that. But a very interesting one was made by the director who did Freds, which I'll talk about Freds in detail in a minute. And I think it was from 82, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'll try and find the IMDb page. And it's basically explaining what happens if a nuclear bomb or a hydrogen bomb was detonated over London, a 1 megaton bomb. And it shows you basically the radius in which people would be incinerated, the radius from where it go to third to second to first degree burns, the radius in which you'd have the 600 miles per hour winds from the blast wave that would just crumple you. And I don't think it's meant to be comedic at all, it's meant to be really serious, but there was one line in it that really made me laugh. It shows these characters in the thing, or, actually I think they were real people who were asked to do, the thing for like the documentary. I think they were called like Joy and Eric or something like that, and they follow all the advice in the Protect and Survive booklet, and it shows how they've now made their house fireproof, so it's not going to set alight, like painting their windows white to resist the thermal radiation hitting it. When the nuke initially goes off, and they follow the Protect and Survive thing to the letter. They're in a little lean-to shelter under the stairs, and it says, Joy and Eric should now survive at least for 17 seconds, and then the house just gets demolished by the blast wave. It's quite interesting because it goes into the different types of nuclear bunkers that would have been available. It shows you all the horrible wounds you could have got, while they show you like meat in a pumpkin and things being eviscerated by glass. From blast damage and stuff like that. It's really interesting. Pretty grim, but very, very interesting. There's also a bit where I think they got a couple to live for 2 weeks inside a very primitive fallout shelter with, a bucket for a toilet and things like that. And it shows you, sort of how difficult it would have been to live in cramped, horrible conditions for 2 weeks. Only to come out onto the surface, and find everything had been destroyed. So, again, it was the person who directed Freds, which I'll get onto in a second. Right, so now let's talk about probably the two most famous anti-nuclear war films. So in 1983 there was a film called The Day After. Now, The Day After was this American film that showed basically, I think it's in Kansas it's set, and it shows basically what would happen if there was a full-on exchange between the Soviet Union and the United States. And it's basically, all the people who aren't initially killed are slowly dying from radiation sickness. The Day After was very, very good at apparently changing political opinion at the time because it, showed people just how scary a nuclear exchange would be. However, the problem with The Day After is a little bit, and it's definitely not a bad film, I definitely advise you to watch it, and that's why it's on this list, but the problem with it is a bit too Hollywood in a lot of ways. You know, some of the soundtrack to it is very rousing music, even though it's meant to finish, you know, on a downer, it still feels like, you know, oh, we're going to succeed as America, you know, and all this sort of stuff. So, the film that really trumped it, that only came out a year later, is Fred's. So, you can actually get a really good remaster of Fred's now. If you're looking for it, I'd recommend this. Apparently in the States there has been a Blu-ray released. However, in the UK the remaster was only just done onto a DVD because it was in 4x3 and everything, so I think they thought, what's the point of releasing it on Blu-ray? So this is the 2-disc edition. You get the film and a couple of hours worth of extras. So Fred's was basically the guy I was saying before who did the... I might have his name here. Directed by Mick Jackson, there you go. So Mick Jackson was the guy who did the other thing. So basically, what Fred's is about is... it's like a docudrama that tries to be more accurate than The Day After. It's done less like a film. And it's basically exactly what would happen to Britain if there was a nuclear exchange between the Soviet Union and NATO and the US. So you don't find out at all what happens with the Soviet Union and the US. It just basically, it starts off before the nuclear exchange happens with the escalations. And you've got like more and more stuff on TV and the radio coming in with all the Protect and Survive films. Protect and Survive I'll try and remember to put in the IMDb thing below as well, because that's worth watching if you haven't seen Protect and Survive before. But basically it shows you all the escalations going on between the US and the Soviet Union, again on the news, like Countdown to Looking Gas, it's like in the Persian Gulf or something like that, where there's been some like Middle Eastern thing, a proxy war, and they're both, you know, at each other's throats over it. It shows you all like the breakdown of society as people are getting more and more panicked and like looting shops, you know, to get supplies, people trying to get out of the cities and just roadblocking everything because all the traffic's, you know, stopped. Then you have the nuclear exchange. It shows you in pretty graphic detail what would happen in the nuclear exchange. And then what Fred's does, unlike The Day After, is it goes quite a long time after the nuclear exchange, you know, years and decades afterwards, showing just how, you know, screwed everybody would be. It shows, you know, the immediate effects of looters killing people for food, soldiers killing people for food. A lot of this stuff, as I said, is in the classified or now declassified documents you can read. Fred's was actually very true to a lot of the stuff that, I don't know if they'd actually have had access to these files at the times, but they guessed right anyway if they didn't. And it basically shows just how much the civil defence and government failings happened. People, you know, seeking medical treatment and being exposed to, you know, like medieval levels of amputation and, you know, completely pointless surgery because there's not enough to actually, you know, supplies and hygienic things to treat people. And then it, you know, just keeps going further and further away, showing, you know, the abysmal harvests that would happen and the effects of nuclear winter. And I know lots of people say nuclear winter wouldn't happen. I would just watch the film for the sake of it, and, you know, if you don't believe in it, that's fine, but lots of scientists do, lots of scientists don't, so it's, you know, but Fred's is, the thing about Fred's is it's just very, almost realistic, and graphic. You know, it changed a lot of people's opinions about nuclear war, and it's definitely worth watching for that reason. There's some dark comedy elements in it as well that you'll probably appreciate. I think the Traffic Warden's probably one of the best bits from it, if you've not seen it. Traffic Warden with his SLR there. But, yeah, Fred's is just very good at being a very gritty, dark, realistic depiction of what would actually happen if a nuclear exchange happened, and then, you know, what would happen in the immediate aftermath, and then the longer term sort of scale aftermath of a nuclear thing. And speaking of aftermath, that will be the film I finish off this sort of video with. A very low budget film I found on Amazon Prime Video streaming about some people in America who try and survive in a basement from, you know, after a nuclear exchange, getting exposed to radiation and looters. It has a lot of elements a bit like The Day After when they're in the basement, but that's like the entire film. So it's people slowly succumbing to radiation sickness and, you know, all stuff like that. So again, I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it. It's more of a film for film's sake, but I didn't have very high expectations when I went in to watch it. Oh, another film I've forgotten before I forget, Trinity and Beyond. Apparently there's some weird kids thing called Trinity and Beyond, but I'm not on about that. I'm on about Trinity and Beyond, the atomic bomb movie. It's got Shatner narrating, and it has a really good haunting soundtrack by, I think it's William Stromberg, who did the soundtrack. It's basically just remastered, declassified footage of lots of the American and Soviet nuclear bomb tests. As you know, the bombs got bigger and bigger. It explains a bit about the science between like atom bombs and hydrogen bombs. But you mostly watch it for the spectacle. Lots of people complain that it didn't, condemn the US enough for its nuclear tests, but that's not really what the film's about. It's sort of a cataloguing of nuclear tests. As I said, the annoying thing is, in the UK, I could not find a DVD and a Blu-ray for it at a reasonable price. I had to watch it online. But the extras on the DVD and Blu-ray look really good. One of the ones on the Blu-ray, I think, and the DVD, was that you could watch the entire film of just the atomic bomb and hydrogen bomb tests with just the soundtrack. All the other sounds had been removed in the narration, so you could watch it, more like a music video, which sounded a good thing. I did buy the soundtrack to it because the soundtrack is great if you like that sort of music. But yeah, Trinity and Beyond is very frightening. It's a good counterpart to Fred's, because with Fred's you can see kind of like, as a sort of docudrama, what would happen to people and society, and Trinity and Beyond to watch, just gloriously remastered, horrifying footage of the actual nuclear tests. The thing Trinity and Beyond is very good at explaining is just how much more powerful the hydrogen bombs got from the atom bombs. The Castle Bravo sequence is probably one of the best, sort of, most frightening real things I've ever seen. But yeah, that's my list all summed up, so quite a few on there. As I said, I'll try and remember in the video description to find the IMDb pages for any of these films and documentaries. If I remember more as well, I might just stick some more links in there for you to watch as well. But there you go, that's my summary of nuclear war films that are well worth watching.